it is. Okay,
Yeah, it is.
Thanks.
Thank you, Melanie.
Are we okay just proceeding, Ms. Stowe? Okay.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay. So I actually couldn't hear what you said, Will. I think you were making a motion to approve the minutes.
Yes. Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. So, and here's Dr. Keeling. Great. Welcome, Dr. Keeling. Good to see you this morning. And I will pass to you for our racial equity reflection.
I apologize. I have a new computer. It is not friendly to me. We keep going through this every morning. So I think today we were going to go through the assessment that you had received from the School Board Association, that organization you're with. I think we were going to use that as kind of the kickoff to some conversations around equity. Are you good with that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we could do that. Okay, so I'm going to pull that up here, and Mr. Jones, I will need to share my screen, but it's going to take me just a minute to get to that real quick. Okay, so one issue I have, oh wait, no, it's not an issue with WebEx, it's just Google Meet. I couldn't figure out how to mute and share at the same time, so we're good. I know how to do that. Let's see. Okay, so this is, so I'm participating in a group called School Board Partners, and its goal is developing anti-racist school board practices and how to encourage us in doing that. And so we're going to talk about a couple of these rubric items. So this was sort of like a self-assessment that members in this program, different board members from all over the place, it was just sort of a way to evaluate where our board is. And so to the left is like category 1, like we haven't even started yet. And the middle categories are sort of, you know, we're doing some of this. So I think they call the left unaware, and they call the right, the far right, like liberation from, you know, historically white supremacist practices. So this is one of the questions. And so I will read it aloud and we can think about it. Would we say, in terms of board representation, that our board does not reflect our school community? We have not made any effort to recruit or support diverse candidates, nor to set a community goal regarding board diversity? Would we say our board reflects the student population and community along some demographic dimensions, but not all? We have not worked to create an active pipeline of board members who reflect the communities in our district, or put in place meaningful supports for current and prospective board members of color? Or would we say our board is representative of our student body with regards to race and ethnicity? I'm not going to read this whole last one because it's long. I think you might just like reading it on your own. So take a minute to read there. Okay. Dr. Keeling, do you want to, are you wanting to lead this, or do you want me to lead this?
I think we can like discuss it together. We can co-lead it.
Okay.
So I think what we have decided is to go through some of these, a few of them at each meeting for the next couple of meetings, for the board to assess where they feel like they stand, and to kind of begin to have some conversations around how do we get to that, is it 1, 2, and 3 How do we get to that number 3, which would be that end column? So we can start with this one and kind of hear what board members are thinking and kind of have some discussions around how do we proceed through the continuum. So I guess the first question is for board members to kind of throw out where you think you fall in number 1, number 2, or number 3.
Carrie, is it okay if I jump in?
Absolutely.
So I am glad we're having this conversation. As a board, I think we are probably somewhere between number 1 and number 2. We have a little bit of representation, but we have a long way to go. One of the things I think about is that this job really doesn't offer any sort of support to the people who are doing it. I spend, well, certainly not, it's not full-time all the time, but there have been many weeks this year where this has been a full-time thing for me. And it's like $250 a month, which, I'm privileged that I can make that work in my family, but it's not sustainable, maybe even for me long-term. And it's not, people who need to work it would be very challenging for them to do, at least this year, it would have been really hard for them to be serving. And, that's a problem across many government offices, but something that is on my mind. And also the childcare thing. I mean, we used to get a stipend in case we needed childcare, and there are many times that I have used that because I've had to hire babysitters to go to full day trainings or whatever. But I end up paying out of pocket for a lot of childcare to do this gig. So anyway, this isn't about me, but it's just something that has affected me, and I can make it work in my family, but I think it would be a barrier for a lot of folks to serve on this board. And it's something that is on my heart because I have experienced it. So just throwing that out there.
Thanks, Hillary. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw a couple of things. First of all, the board represents the public, not just the school communities. Our stakeholders are broader than the school community, and we as a board don't decide who's on it. We as the boards decide who's on it. And so this whole topic goes into broader issues of voter participation. Now, that said, I agree with Hillary that there are obstacles to people to serve on the board, and particularly with respect to access and childcare, so there are hardships to serve on a board. But I just think I just want to remember that the board serves the community at large, not just the schools.
Yeah, I would just pile on that, I do work full time, and it is challenging, and I can't imagine for others. I do have some flexibility in my family to be able to do it. And yeah, I think people don't realize the commitment to do research and be able to have that time, the quiet time to reflect and to go out and talk to the community and ask questions, and having childcare, or just when you're going to have time to do this, and your regular life, and I think it is one of the largest barriers for anyone. And a lot of people have told me that's why a lot of retired people go into politics, is because they have the ability. And I think that's a barrier that somehow needs to be reflected on in our community to see how we can get more people engaged.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm thinking about is, you know, we each bring our own experiences with this to, you know, how we view everything, right? So like, similar to Will, understanding like what is, how do you do this when you have a full-time job and you're trying to do this as well? And so I think just applying that to this idea of sort of a board representative of the student body in terms of race and ethnicity, like just to specifically name, you know, we don't have any board members right now who are Latinx, and I wonder if we did, what perspectives they might bring to the board in terms of understanding, you know, and that's a pretty substantial group of our student population. Something I think about these rubrics in general, and I'm doing the same fellowship that Carrie is, and some of like the framing that they give around this rubric is one, it's like it's very much a work in progress. So they have like had iterative versions of it. And two, that like nobody's going to fit in just one category, right? So there's like bits and pieces where you're like, oh, we're maybe a little bit more like this, more like that. But to me, what's really interesting about it is sort of even presenting ideas that are different than what I've ever considered. So like in that last column, the like, we hold information sessions for potential school board candidates and sort of make those inclusive and accessible. Like that's an interesting idea. You know, how many of us have talked to people who've considered it about what does the job take and that kind of thing? What is being a school board member? What decisions do you make versus the district does? So I think that there's some interesting stuff here to consider in terms of how we might sort of make it easier for candidates to understand what this is, in addition to sort of potentially addressing some of those barriers and make it hard for people.
Yeah, those are all good points. Dr. Keeling, do you have anything you want to add? We could do another question in a minute or two.
Sure. I think these are like good points, and I also like this rubric because it does, just like you were saying, Ms. Smiley, it gets you to start thinking about things that you may not have thought about. So when you look at a board that may continually not be representative of the community, I think it's great for you all to have those conversations around what are those barriers that prevent it from being representative of the community. And I think you have begun to unfold some of those things: the time commitment, the financial commitments, the support that's needed to do the work. And I think to Ms. Hauser's point about that you serve the community, that last sentence around having those information sessions, like it would seem to me like part of the work with the community is to build community members for them to be able to run for the board. And like you said, reaching out to the Latinx community and to representatives of all of our different student groups so that they do serve on the board. Like, and I know that's hard, but if it's something that the board wants to work towards, it's something that we can talk about. How do we work towards that? How do we begin to reach out into different communities and have these information sessions and to talk to people about, and to make people know that you can do this. You can run for a school board. You don't just have to sit and feel like I'm unheard. One of the things that we're doing with my brothers and sisters Keeper Orange is beginning to do this same work with students and young adults, and beginning to bring them in to sit on boards and to, for lack of a better word, train them around how do you run for office? What does that look like? What are the time commitments, et cetera? But that's like our commitment to beginning to build the next generation, and to not just have students feel like decisions are made for us, but that we have a voice in that. We can sit on a board, you know? So I think that it's a good effort that we might want to consider. How do we go out into the communities so that we can begin to build up and make sure that it may help people, even if they say, I don't want to run for board, they may just start speaking up more. They may start attending board meetings and speaking for public comment. So those are just some of my thoughts around it.
Ms. Doyle, would it be okay? Good morning, everyone. If I sort of chime in as well.
Oh, please do,
Appreciate-
Dr. Felder.
Thank
And
you.
others too, other staff members too.
Thank you so much. And again, good morning, everyone. Great conversation. So I agree with everything that's been shared and echo in particular what Dina shared, Dr. Keeling. I also wonder, given the barriers that you've raised, that are personal to you and probably cut across a number of board members, I wonder how can we begin to dismantle some of those barriers. And I think back to just some of the engagements that we've had and what we've heard from some community members with regards to just in terms of outreach and their participation in board meetings and some of the things that get in their way. And I just wonder if there would be some consideration around, or invite the board to consider, so what perhaps could meetings be held at, would one be able to participate if meetings weren't held every other Monday from 6:30 to 9:30? Would there be consideration in that regard, which may provide or afford people who, due to their work schedule or their family schedule, that's an impediment to them? And so I just want, so in terms of participating on the board, but also in terms of participating in board meetings. So just, just a thought around that.
Good morning, everyone. If I may just share an experience that I've had in another community where, and this goes a little bit beyond board participation, but if we're trying to really increase our and diversify overall participation and engagement in governing bodies, period, what I've experienced is actually, it was like a seminar, a series of weeks and sessions on just educating, and people like had to apply or be nominated, but I think that can be changed, right? But it provided our community members to learn about what it entails to be a part of a governing body and to be introduced to the different governing bodies within the county, and just kind of understanding like Robert's Rule of Order, and this is how this governing body functions and their purpose, and just to kind of like introduce people and educate people, right, on a broader scale. And then just encouraging all of our underrepresented families, to say, no, you know what, you have a place, but yes, and here, but let's educate you on what it entails to actually run for a seat, and how you campaign for a seat, and how you, what your responsibilities are, and the time commitment, and just, educating, because oftentimes, I don't know, other than some of our social studies classes, that's the end of it, right? For a lot of community members. So that was just something I wanted to share, and I think it can be done for board governing body, just for the board, if we wanted to look at smaller scale. But I know, and this was this was in Boston, and it was a Commonwealth seminar, and we attracted a lot of different community members from our different underrepresented groups, and they would, we would go to the State House, and we would have different conversations. And here we could actually go to, the commissioner's, building, and, or to the school board. But I think it was a great opportunity to educate and also to empower.
Dr. Dawson, that actually exists at the county level and town level here. So
that's great.
Several years, I participated in the Citizens Academy for the town of Hillsborough several years ago, and it's fantastic. And I wonder if there's room for some partnership there where the school board could introduce what we do and have a brief segment with that. So maybe I'll reach out to Jen Weaver and just get her thoughts on that, because that, if the board wants me to, because that might be a very easy way to partner without reinventing the wheel.
I love that. And the county, I'm not sure who I think that's still happening, the County Citizens Academy.
The County Citizen Academy is still going, and I think it's a more appropriate place for school because I know they already cover school funding and important things about the school. So, you know, and it's like the relationship with the county and the schools is closer, if you will, as opposed to the town relationship. So, but the county's still doing it.
I guess, Bonnie, I was just going to say really quick, the reason that I was thinking the town is because the people who live in Hillsborough are the people who could actually serve on this board. So I hear what you're saying about funding and sort of from a logistical standpoint, it's a closer relationship. But in terms of people who would be attending it, I bet we would get a higher percentage of attendees who could actually serve on this board at. Anyway, maybe there's room for partnership at those levels.
Yeah, I don't live in town, so, you know, people who live in the county, who, you know, a lot of our, I don't know how our school population divides, but I think a large part of our school population doesn't live in town. But I just don't know what those numbers are. So.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point. I was thinking more broadly about Hillsborough, but that's a good point.
And to Dr. Felder's point about how do we dismantle some of this. So one of the conversations I had with someone who's semi-interested in this and says, well, I can't do it for childcare. And if you look at the idea of virtual meeting participation, so a school board member can, you know, I feel strongly about participating in person because of the COVID situation, but is virtual meeting participation something that we should embrace as a, you know, as a continuing practice in order to make it easier for people with kids to participate on the school board or to consider running for school board?
Yeah, I think that's worth looking at. I mean, it was only just a couple of years ago, or maybe a year ago, that we passed a policy allowing any remote participation. And so once we're like more fully in person, what would it look like to participate virtually? Do we have a limit on that, or do we expand it broader? I think that's worth looking at. In before times, when everyone was in person and somebody was sort of dialing in, the person or people dialing in would not participate in votes in closed session. Is that right?
Correct. It was, they couldn't participate in closed session was the original.
Right. And so we might, I mean, we'll just have to reconsider that when we're at the point where we're fully in person again, I guess.
But the policy as it's written allows it. It doesn't prevent it at all right now. The revised policy allows anybody to participate remotely, and it's at their discretion.
I think there's a limit of 3 times.
Not
Check that out.
I think we changed it because of this. And I mean, certainly we're voting in closed session now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was changed, and the discussion we had around it was, should we put that on there? And then there was discussion of, do you have to have a reason for not being in person? And we all agreed we're adults and, you know, just do it. But to your point, Sarah, I remember when we asked originally for being virtual, it was not at that time something the whole board wanted to do. But now it's where you can do that. And I think it's great because it does allow more people, especially if you have to travel for work.
Mm-hmm. And the public participation, I mean, it's, you know, understanding that some people still do have internet challenges at their homes. I mean, the amount of people who are attending board meetings has been really remarkable. So.
Okay, so those are all some really good ideas about partnering with, and my sense is it does you know, the town of Hillsborough, which I love, I'm not actually a part of as outside the city limits. So I'd be happy to do I'd love to do the Citizens Academy in a way. It does seem like we fit in the county section a little bit better. But regardless, partnering with those programs, I think would be great. And I wonder if we could also talk about like a parent academy or tie it into parent academy at some point, if that would be a possibility. So to think about. So we could, just to put that out there, we can come back to that. I don't think I'm going to go on to another topic because I want to make sure we have time for our conversation around some of the work Will's been doing, meeting with people from SNAC in Chapel Hill and DSNAC in Durham, and also talking with Ms. Crimmins. So I know we want to have some time for that before we have our Flamboyan Fellowship Coaches joining us at 10. So any quick closing comments? Are you all ready? Will, do you think we should go on?
I think based on the timing, we might need to. I was hoping that Jennifer would be able to participate in this.
Me too. I think we should go ahead and start, and then we can always bring it up again when she's able to join.
I just want to jump in here really quick and just mention how this is like one of those things where like we meet during work hours and people who work full time, it's a barrier to participation. Anyway, just noticed that and thought I would throw it in there.
Great.
One thing, just a thought out, not for, and that's, does there come a time where the board starts meeting in community and in schools? And so one option that's presented to me is the idea of maybe going up to Cedar Grove and having a meeting up there. And it might not be our regular business meetings. We might have some special meetings in community. And also occasionally, especially if a school is a topic, and I realize that's not happened yet, but could we host some of our meetings at schools? Make it easier for parents and teachers at the schools to participate. Listening board then. Anyway.
Yep. Okay. I think I agree with you, Bonnie. And it's nice when we've had it at Standback. There's lots of room there, but there's other ways we could expand out the community. So I think we should definitely come back to that. Okay. Well, I'm going to pass to you.
Okay. Okay. I think Todd's going to have to give me the sharing because I don't have share. There we go. All right, so so from the past few meetings, we've talked about SNAC at Chapel Hill and SNAC or DSNAC from Durham. And one of the actions that I took after the discussion here was to get with Connie. And also I've talked to some parents as well that are in our special needs programs. And so Connie and I sat down with her team and also have shared this with Dr. Felder as well on what do we think to, or what do we have as a recommendation to go forward and what would we do around this? So the recommendations, there's only a couple of charts here, mainly leaving it for discussion of the group here, is that create a district-based special needs advisory council. So instead of having a parent-driven one, do more of a district-driven one, talking about sustainability, the resource, board support for new families, and help promote the diversity of the group. We also think there should be an ad hoc committee to help create the charter, talk about recommendations for bylaws, and of course, a name if there needs to be a unique name for this. And then start some education sessions now This could be a monthly thing where Connie had some great ideas about, what is an IEP and what to expect, what is disability related services. And because a lot of times, some of the things I've heard from many families was, as you enter the school system, just trying to find information or having that collateral, and being able to have that in a single place on our district website, and having a way for people to know that they can sign up and learn more about it. Let's see, Connie, do you have any other comments on this slide?
No, I was just going to say that, as I in speaking with Mr. Atherton, the way that we want to go about this, and I say we because it is a joint endeavor, it is really to how can we meet the needs of our parents right now in a greater span, and through parent education, through even introductions of who is your central service team, explaining what our role is. And I think that would be really beneficial for staff as well as parents to hear what is the role of central office, because it's unique. It is really to advocate for the student and to help to navigate all the pieces, and adults that are at an IEP meeting, and how do we provide parent education around that. So yeah, I'm really excited about this, and I think going slow is the correct way to do this, or for Orange County right now to go about it that way, just because there's so much going on, and we want to make sure that we are really getting in parents and who may not know where to access services, may not know, oh, my child has an IEP, what next? That's always a topic, but also to make sure that we are including all parents from all schools, from all backgrounds.
And I think one of the key things, Connie, that we talked about was this is a place for people to learn, and how do we do things going forward? What's coming about across our country, or things we think would be unique to Orange County. It is not a place that you have a specific thing that happened and you want to get it addressed, or you want to come talk about it. This is not that meeting. But obviously, if it does come up, and both SNAC communities have told me this happens, that somebody will come in and say, I have this issue. Immediately, they're referred to the correct people, and they're given the help to get it resolved, and the community moves forward. But the biggest value that was definitely evident is the education, and also people feeling, I think I said this multiple times, feeling like they're not alone, that they are have a bigger community of support, and understanding how the school plays in, the community, families, and seeing things as they evolve, and just learning about things so they can go back and look at a prior meeting and learn about IEPs, or learning about, how do you get different services, or what's available, or things that we are doing, or even learning about programs that we have that may not be obvious.
And I think you bring up a really good point about education, and not, this is we're all working together in collaboration. It's not the board against the school system against the parents. It's how do we come together to support this unique population, because everyone brings something different to the table, and how do we honor those and help move forward, and to make the best services for special education in North Carolina.
Exactly. So I have just a couple of other slides.
Well, can
sure.
I ask a quick question? This is really divergent to me from what I understand SNAC to be, because SNAC in Chapel Hill is a combined group of district teachers and parents, And parents have always been in control of the organization. So it's not a district organization, it's a parent organization. And, so I just was curious how you see that.
So Bonnie, that's not correct. It is a district organization. So it is, the bylaws are of the school board. It is the difference, I would say, and maybe that's why there's a perception is it's a parent group, is that the parents are the people that are elected to the different chair, vice chair. They work with the director to get the agendas together and content, and the parents present, but they are working together with the district. It is bound by the district bylaws.
Absolutely. I guess we're saying the same thing. Go ahead.
So can I ask then, is it almost like what we have the equity task force, which will then become the is it the equity advisory board? Is that right? What it'll be called, Dr. Keeling? Is that like a similar structure?
I would say it's similar, but it's not an advisory board. So it is more of a board that not only educates, but looks at the future, and it could bring recommendations, but it is not intended to do like, I'm going to advise you all the time, right? It is meant to be a board or a committee that educates, looks at unique items, and helps pull forward things that the group feels is important. And to Bonnie's point, it does look like it is run by the parents, but it is bound by the bylaws, and there is heavy parent presence by ensuring at each level it's sustained. And that's one of the key things of why the district level would make more sense versus having a parent level, because there's not a built-in ability to sustain, and also the bylaws ensure that everybody has the same expectation of the value and what is appropriate, not appropriate for the group.
Well, yeah, and I guess I didn't mean as the advisory board part. I didn't mean the advisory part, but like I'm thinking in terms of the fact that it's bound by bylaws. And so who runs, for example, the elections? So it has bylaws within the district, but whereas our equity advisory board, Dr. Keeling kind of processes applications and things like that. Who do the parents, are the parents the ones managing the elections and the officers and all of that?
So it is done that way, but that's why on these next ones are thoughts to modify the bylaws to fit Orange County schools. So to your point, that's why there's no recommendation to just pick it up and use it. It is to go through and say, okay, what makes sense for Orange County schools? How would we want this? How do we want the schools to participate and make, recommendations or engage parents? So you're spot on to the point that the recommendation going forward was, hey, let's look at how SNAC they've got the bylaws written. Let's have this ad hoc team go through it and say, okay, does this really make sense for Orange County? Yes or no? Should we modify it? And then go through those. And I sent these charts out, and it has the bylaws actually in the backup for everybody to read. It's not long, but it's still the point of making it the right fit for Orange County schools. I'm sorry, Bonnie, you were trying to say something?
I just want to, I'm kind of super sensitive on the power balance. And it's important to me, so SNAC, and I hear what you're saying about who the bylaws are part of the district bylaws, but it's always, and I see it as a best practice model, that it's always been a joint decision-making committee between the district, the board, actually, is the board's on it, right? The district, the board, and the parents. It puts the parents on an equal footing so that they're not waiting for the quote board to decide that. So that's what's real. And speaking to our earlier conversation, we would like SNAC, Chapel Hill, as you know, has a PTA council, a joint PTA council, and these are groups where they grow future board members. You know, so it's all of that. Anyway, I just wanted to just be sensitive to having the parents own this as opposed to attend another kind of board meeting.
Yeah, so you're correct, Bonnie, that they are not attendees. They are active. They manage, send out, work with the district, and it is very cooperative. And you know, even when talking to Durham, they talked about, you know, the maturity level of Chapel Hill because it's been there a very long time. And one of those things from the maturity level is growing into what works best for them. And Durham's at the very start of theirs and, you know, building out their version of SNAC.
Will I have a question? Do you
Sure.
have another slide you want to share first?
Oh, well, there's only one. This is it. The reference is just where we got it from, but the thoughts, I mean, that's all we had for content. Everything else, there's backup and just bylaws so everybody could just read through how they work, but also the website's on there and you can see how detailed they have minutes and you can see the representation at all school levels. And it is, you know, very engaged, if you will, across the district.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I know we have a number of board members here, so I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to ask questions. I was just going to make 2 points. One is, as Mr. Atherton knows, Jennifer has also participated in a group like this in Wayne County Public Schools. So I know we want to hear her thoughts. But I also want to, I had heard the critique that these groups in Chapel Hill and Durham really did tend to be dominated by white parents. And so since we get a chance to start fresh, how do we, I want to know how we bring in parents. We need to, and Ms. Crimmins touched on this, but we just need to make sure we do this well, that we're starting at the outset with a real emphasis on diversity. And I know we've had some good practice at that this year with the work Ms. Stowe's doing and Dr. Keeling with family engagement. So in terms of starting slow, I feel like that's where we need to start slow. We need to make sure we have good representation from the outset. So do you have ideas about that, or have you already been able to do that? Or
so Mr. Atherton and I talked about this, but when you're talking about students with disabilities, it's not only racial and making sure that we have Black representatives and Latinx representatives, but also disability category, right? Because the needs for parents of students with autism is different than the needs of students, of parents of students with a learning disability. So that cross connection is going to be important. And then also the needs of parents who have students with complex disabilities is different than a student who has articulation errors. So really honoring all those disabilities and making sure that the voices are heard for the program and not just one group versus the other. And that's where we can get, where parents can get adversarial with the district. So really, I so appreciated Mr. Atherton's approach to this, because it does seem like if we build slow, we can be purposeful and thoughtful as we move forward.
One thought, I just wanted to sort of double click on Bonnie's point about being attentive to like where the power is and where sort of the setting of the agenda comes from and things like that. It does feel really, really important to make sure that we're clear from the outset about what the goal is, right? So is the goal of the group parent education and sort of peer education and that kind of thing, or is the goal of the group improvement of our services and supports and things like that? And I don't think it necessarily has to be one or the other, but I do think like what are we trying to achieve? What's the group focused on? And sort of who's setting the agenda are really, really important to consider. I think I wasn't clear. It sounded, it sounded a little bit like it may be about parent education, but that may just be those education sessions rather than the snack as a whole.
You're correct. You're correct.
Okay.
Sarah. Maybe I pushed a little too hard on the education, because one of the things Connie wanted to start was to do education now, but you're absolutely right. The goal or the purpose would not be just education, because part of the process is, say that there is a new evolving method for learning speech or helping nonverbal students, for example. Part of this group would bring in an expert, and then part of the group would talk about, hey, how would this work if we did this here? Recommendations from staff or parents and other experts, and looking about how to develop a program, if it made sense, of course, to meet those. So it is not just education. Education comes out of it, and there are things that would be done, just generally, like a PTA might ask, hey, Snack, could someone come and educate on IEPs or things like that? But it is very purposeful in the sense of, how do we develop our programs? Are there things we are not looking at, or our district needs, or things that need to be evolved? So it is all encompassing of that. And I appreciate you bringing it up. It is, education is one facet of it. And in the first, I think it's slide 6 on the slides I sent out, it talks about the purpose and advocacy and comprehensive programs, and so it goes through all of those. And I think that's one of the key elements for this committee to come bring back, is maybe the first thing is, hey, here's the purpose, right? Here's what makes sense for Orange County schools. And then going through all of the other elements about how do you pull from the different schools, because one of the challenges that was brought up is, how do you make sure you get the correct representation? Well, the schools know the kids and the families and can help advocate to make sure we're getting those people. But I'm getting ahead of myself, but there are ways through the program that we could ensure that. But I think the key is going slow enough to make sure we think through how that would work, and to make sure that it isn't a group that's just run by the district, but at least we put things in place to make sure that it's effective and that nobody feels like they're just attending a meeting, of course.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And yeah, lots of parent involvement in sort of defining what it is. But yeah, I mean, that education piece does seem like it would be really important, because every family probably only, unless they're an expert in this outside of it, which is possible, and we should find those books if there are parents too, like they're just going to have their experience with their child's unique set of needs. And so understanding how all the rest of it works that they haven't experienced is going to be important. So I see the place for education for sure. I was sort of reading what we were doing as like more like this will be an education group. So thank you for clarifying that. I think that's really good.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add is, one of the most common things that I hear from, say, the Chapel Hill, Chatham, and Orange County Autism Society is when a child is diagnosed with autism, for example. Normally that's at a very young age, like 3 or 2-ish, and immediately they're in a position of, what do I do, right? And they don't know where to go. And they'll go to our school websites, and it's very legal. Like if you read pre-K, you may not realize that, hey, this is an avenue for you. So a lot of this is trying to help those people taking that first step too, that, you know, here's collateral and information as well. So I know that that is a big step. And then also people just knowing they're not alone through this journey. And here's the avenue you can take. So, and Connie, I greatly appreciate all of your help and your staff's help as we discuss this, because I know y'all have been, you know, working with a lot of families and ideas about this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And, you know, if we can reach more families via this versus each case one at a time, because there's similarities, and that's a way to really be helpful and to really educate. I don't want to keep saying educate, but to really partner with parents so that they can navigate a complex system.
I was always got the impression, actually two ways, that the snack groups are almost like respite for our parents. Like it's a safe place for them to go, where they can learn, where they can be with people who are going through similar experiences and realize and kind of begin to normalize their experience. And I have noticed that some of our parents are really struggling without that support system. And so that's troubling. That's always been troubling to me. I want to go to Carrie's point, and that's about classification, because my understanding is that there is an underreporting of special needs in the Black and Hispanic communities, that we're not that parents are resistant to having their kids classified as special needs. And so how does that play out here? You're thinking that this is puzzling to you.
I'd have to defer to Connie or Dr. Felder. I don't know.
I would like to think on that a little bit, because we have to remember that that special education and special needs is an extra help. And so we are identifying a student with a disability when we go through that process, and it is parent choice. So it is not school system choice to identify it, as ultimately is parent choice. So if I could think on that a little bit, Ms. Hauser, I would appreciate that.
So as we approach 10, and Ms. Crimmins and Mr. Atherton, thank you so much. I know a lot of conversation and footwork has gone into bringing this before the committee, and I'm turning off my video because things were glitchy on my end. But I'm wondering, is this something like what do you see the timeline being? Is this something we want to talk about? We have 2 more community engagement meetings. We can definitely kind of track how this is going in community engagement. Do you feel like we need something else, like another opportunity to focus on this? And I know you mentioned an ad hoc committee. So, so what are your thoughts of like a time frame in terms of our work to do as a committee, and then maybe our work as a whole board?
My initial thought is, if the committee is comfortable with this moving forward, the ad hoc could be done one of 2 ways. It could be done by the superintendent and it's driven that way, or if the board wants it done at a board level, then we would just need to bring it towards the full board and move it that way. So it could move 2 different ways. And I don't personally have a preference on it. I don't know, Dr. Felder, if you have a preference on how to proceed with this.
I do not, Mr. Atherton. Thanks for asking. Whatever the will of the board is will work for us.
So I guess, Carrie,
Hillary,
if we
what's
want,
yeah.
I was just going to say, if we want board representation, it should go through the board. If we want, it not to be done with the board representation, then Dr. Felder could do it. It's just my thought, but.
So I don't think that we have to have, it doesn't have to be ordained by the board to have a board liaison, does it? I mean, we have board liaisons with all sorts of things. I think that every time the board, puts our hands on something and sort of makes it our own, it makes it more complicated for staff. So I sort of lean towards letting Ms. Crimmins and Dr. Felder take the reins of it. And, if we want board representation, I think that's great, because I know the board really values this community and wants to elevate concerns and the voices of our special needs students. I guess that's my current inclination, just working through other task forces and things that the board has created. It might be simpler to just have it be a standalone thing, but I'm open.
That makes sense to me. I'm wondering if it could be a topic on a future agenda just for board input, knowing that there's some other board members who aren't here, who might have some thoughts about, what they'd like to see it do. It wouldn't need to be a vote, just sort of an opportunity for input.
Sure. I will circle up with Dr. Felder about when that makes sense to put on the agenda, but one of the next 1 or 2 meetings, we'll get it on there.
So just for clarity, Dr. Felder and Connie are going to move forward with it, and then we're going to have additional discussion to make sure all thoughts are gathered as they move along.
Sounds good to me. Does that sound good to you, Will?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't want us to walk away with, either Connie or Dr. Felder thinking we needed to wait to that meeting, because I agree. I want to hear other ideas on this, but I know there's some initial stuff that could get moving without that as well. So that sounds fantastic to me.
That's great, and great work. I'm so glad that this really has been underway for several months, and I really appreciate it. All right. Well, great timing, because it's 10 o'clock, and my thought was that we could go straight into hearing from Dr. Keeling and Ms. Stowe, who I imagine are going to introduce our Flamboyan coaches, give us a Flamboyan Fellowship update, introduce the coaches who I believe are joining us today. And if we need a break, we'll do that when they're done sometime by 11. And then we have another topic after that. Does that sound good? Can I pass the mic to Ms. Stowe and Dr. Keeling?
That sounds good. And Todd, could you make our 2 guests, add them where they can be on camera, please? It's Kyle and Mike. Perfect. All right. And
I think they also have a presentation. So if there's
okay.
needs to be done for them to be able to share their screen, can we make that happen as well?
Do they need to share
So
now?
while they're getting geared up, and it's so interesting because the work of the Flamboyan Foundation and Dr. Keelan and I working together is not by mistake. The Flamboyan Foundation, their sole mission is to ensure that students who are most impacted by inequities are prepared to succeed in school and life. And so the 2 things that they work with their teams on is how to better engage families and how to address inequities. And so when we talk about, for example, increasing our literacy efforts and our literacy achievement, we've really got to look deep at why those may or may not be occurring, and really look at how do we listen, we learn, we understand, we convene, we incorporate, challenge, transform, and it's really about sustainable solutions. So it's not about the big idea. It's about this has to make a difference when Melanie Stowe's not here, when the Flamboyan Foundation and the cohort are done, that we've impacted a solution that's sustainable. And so we're just so glad that Mike and Kyle are here to share their perspective, and they continue to push us. We work on plans to meet with our underrepresented families. We meet with the foundation every 3 weeks, more if needed. and they're like, hey, this thing you thought was perfect, we need to tweak it a little. So they really push us, and we welcome that, because the goal is not about us. The goal is about engaging families. And they've just, I mean, I hate to say it, they've been like a real blessing to like the work that we need to do, and a great support system. So Mike, are you taking over, Kyle?
I'm taking over. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. All right. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try to. I'm not as familiar with WebEx, so give me give me a little grace there. All right, let's see if I can do this. All right, I'm going to share. Boom. Share that. Then I'm going to start my slideshow from the beginning. Haha, can you all see that? That looks good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melanie and Dina, and to the entire team, to Kathleen Dawson, to Stan Barrington, to Sandra Blevko, and just everybody in Orange County that we've talked to. We're going to give you a special shout out later. My name is Mike Andrews. I'm Senior Director of Leadership Development and Capacity Building at the Flamboyan Foundation. And I'm just so happy to be here this morning. And special side note, I am actually a resident of North Carolina. I'm kind of your neighbor. I live in Wake County. And I've moved to North Carolina recently in the last 2 years or so. So for a while, I was traveling back and forth to DC, but since pandemic, I've been right here with you, experiencing the crazy weather and all the awesome things in North Carolina. And as we've been hearing from the team in Orange County, it's been a lot of personal reflections I've had as a new parent here with the 9th grader and the 3rd grader. So there's a lot to connect with, but we're really happy to be here. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction to my colleague Kyle is on. Hi, Kyle. We had some information we're going to share with you in the chat, but I'm not sure there's a chat feature, but we'll give all of our links and documents and videos after we're done. Okay. So Flamboyan, who are we? Where do we come from? If you haven't heard of us until this point, Flamboyan is a relatively small family foundation based out of Washington, D.C., founded in Puerto Rico. We believe, as Melanie said at the beginning, that all children deserve the opportunity to live a fulfilling life, no matter the circumstances they were born into. And our founder and president, Kristen Airgood, with our work in DC, about 10, 11 years ago, had the opportunity to talk with educators and leaders and philanthropists in the city and say, what is the one issue in education that if you had the time and the money and the resources to fix or to help with, what would it be? And overwhelmingly, everyone said, how do we better engage families? We know it's important. We see our families every day, but how do we better engage them? And so that's what the Flamboyan Foundation has been centered on working with in DC and with our partners across the country. And that starts with listening. And that's what our founder did. And that's what we ask our fellows to do. That's what the Orange County team has been doing for the last few months, is listening to families, really hearing and listening beyond and through our biases, right? And beyond what we think we know. We are always asking, how do you know what you know? And that work in the fellowship was born with the work that started the Flamboyan Foundation. Through our listening, and in Puerto Rico, just to give perspective, folks always ask, Puerto Rico, where did Puerto Rico come from? Well, our founders are from there. They have a home there. And the focus in Puerto Rico is K-3 literacy on the island. And most recently, due to all of the disasters that they've been through with earthquakes and Hurricane Maria, a lot of our focus in Puerto Rico has just been on revitalizing the island. there's still schools without power. There's still roads that are unpassable. So the Flamboyan Foundation is working in Puerto Rico to help do what we can there. Through our listening and through our work with folks in DC and across the country, we've kind of centered on two major frameworks. And I'm not going to be talking to you the whole time. I want this to be as much of a conversation as it can be. And I'm wondering how these frameworks land with you, just based on what you're seeing in Orange County. But what we challenge and what we work with districts and educators and folks who do across the country is to really think about how our districts, how our teachers, how our principals sharing information with families to better help them play these 5 roles, right? These 5 roles are the center and what we directly work with schools and districts on. How do we help parents communicate higher expectations? How do we help parents support learning at home? How do we provide information that's going to help parents advocate for their child? And so in the fellowship, the fellows are digging deep into here. We're not going to spend a lot of time here now, but this is the work, right? This is where we get really granular and we talk about, high and low impact strategies for schools and what it looks like in different environments. So thinking about the 5 roles and then thinking about how does family engagement, right? What does family engagement need to be and do to help families play those 5 roles, right? And we've kind of centered on, it's a really catchy, catchy phrase on real family engagement, right? We think that family engagement has to be real, based on relationships with teachers built on trust and ongoing communication and shared power. We believe it's built on experiences where educators can challenge their own bias, on academic partnership, right? That includes performance in terms of grades, but also includes social and emotional development as well. And then leadership. The leadership is so important at the school level, at the district level, pulling out to the county and the state level as well. And so we believe that when family engagement is real, that it's going to really help build allies in the community, in school, and to push those 5 roles and make them work for families. So I'm going to pause just for a second there. How is that resonating with you? Does that ring true? Do you feel that is what you're seeing in the county? Anybody come on? We're all family now, so just hop on and you can chat.
Well, I'll just say that I know when we started this committee at the beginning, we were really feeling like we had so many ideas and wanted to be, we were all excited to engage in a lot of action. And we were encouraged, particularly by Ms. Stowe, to make sure that we're always listening. So it's kind of slowed down our action, but we're hopefully becoming better listeners.
Yeah. That's really the challenge. I mean, that's the work. That's the work, right? And we could have all the thoughts we want about our experiences or what we think is happening in our schools and in our communities, but the families will tell you, right? They'll tell you, and they'll be very specific about what the concerns are if the opportunities are there to be heard. And we're always challenging the team, like, what about the folks in the margins? What about the folks that aren't at the PTA meetings, that aren't at the school doors every day? What about those folks that you don't hear from? And we have to make sure that we create a space to listen to them as well. Anything else there?
The past 2 slides have been really interesting to me. And I think I'm looking at this phrase like true allies in educational excellence, as well as the things that were on the previous slide. And just in my own experience, I think that is the piece where we've focused less, right? I think we still have so much work to do on all of the other things, but the idea of like focused on the academic partnerships, about how students are actually doing and our expectations for them, and that piece, I'm excited to see this here, and it feels like a place where we have some work to do as a district.
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, our so much of our focus at Flamboyant and across the country was, how does family engagement help students be better students, right? Like, how does it help them, whether it's grades or whatever the performance is. And we've recently added that it's grades and it's also how are students, feeling? How are they processing their educational experience? Like, how much ownership do they have with it? Like, do they feel like they can trust? And all of those human aspects are just as important. And if, thinking of where we are now with COVID and everything that's happening in the country, it's even sometimes more important than the actual grade, right? Because we see just how important they are to marry those. So thanks for bringing that up, Sarah. That's definitely why we do this, right? Like, because we want students to do well in school, and we also want students to be well. So I think that's really important. Excellent. So I'm going to keep on going here. At any point in time, if you have a question, if you want to talk, just hop off and let me know. All right, so we're here to talk about the Family Engagement Fellowship. And this is a snapshot of cohort 2, our last cohort. And we're just so happy to really be inviting and welcoming Orange County into the network of family engagement professionals and passionate people around the country that are doing this work. We are into our third cohort now. This is the third cohort. We have had to derail so many of our plans because of COVID, but we're here and we're happy to be getting started. If there's time and if there's the ability, I don't know, like I said, I'm newbie to WebEx. Can I show a video? Does that work to show a video?
The audio will not play unless you have an MP4 file.
So if I show something on YouTube, it wouldn't work?
Correct. Sorry.
All right, we're gonna skip our video. It was a beautiful video. You can see a picture of it, right? This is what it would have been.
Mike, sorry to interrupt. There is a chat. Is there a link you could put in the chat that we could watch it ourselves afterwards, or? Thank you.
Yep, Kyle's gonna do that. It's a really awesome video, and it just highlights some of the work that we did with cohort 2. But you get to hear from fellows that were in our previous cohorts. My slide is moving by itself. You get to hear from fellows. You get to hear from me. You get to hear from Diana, who's the leader of this fellowship work, and just to get a good sense of what we're doing and the work, but then also the connections that are being developed through the fellowship. That we lose a little bit of that being on Zoom and being on WebEx and all these things, but we have a long time, and hopefully we'll get to be in each other's faces really soon. Like I said, Orange County joins 14 other districts around the country, states, communities that have done and participated in the fellowship. So you see, like, I just love to look at this map because it just, it shows that the work is vast, right? And we're in different communities. We're in the cities of Richmond and Baltimore, but we're also in Yakima Valley and Utah, which are very different communities. We're in Dallas and Atlanta, Milwaukee, and while the concerns and problems and strategies may sound a little different, ultimately what undergirds all of it is that there needs to be a connection between families and schools. How that connection happens may look different, but ultimately people want to feel like they belong. People want to feel welcome in their schools, right? People want partnerships, and that's what we're seeing across the country. From our fellowship work, we've been able to establish, it's kind of like we have the mindset that once a fellow, always a fellow. Like, you're a part of the Flamboyant family. whether it's, you know, in an official way or in an official or unofficial way. We have partnerships developed with folks in Dallas School District, Independent School District. We have official partnerships with a team in Kansas City. We are working with the State Board of Education in Utah to do some work there across the state. And we're just really excited about this work. All right, so what do we do in the fellowship? And I apologize if this is long, but I just want to make sure that there's a clear understanding of the work that the team is doing, right? So when you see them running around like, oh, we got to do this for Flamboyant, like just know this is what we're going through. We are asking the team and we're helping the team build knowledge and skills in family engagement. So when we talk about those 5 roles, when we talk about real, like I said, we're going deep and we're getting granular in those areas. We are conducting in-depth analysis and design for Orange County, right? We're doing that through a design thinking process. We'll talk about that in a second. We are developing a sustainable organizational approach for family engagement. So the reason why we say sustainable organizational is like, we're not just designing programs. We're not just doing one-off, you know, hey, we're gonna implement, you know, donuts for dads at this school. That's good, but what we're thinking and talking about is a long-term plan. Like, what is our engagement plan for Orange County? And how will we be able to do this, like Melanie said, after the foundation, after the fellowship is over? And then, importantly, we're asking and we're inviting Orange County to join a network of practitioners across the country that are doing this work, that are on the front lines, that are in the offices, that are working with families. And, you know, even though we're remote, you know, Orange County has already been, you know, we've had our first session a few weeks ago where we had our entire cohort on a call. And they were in there talking with folks from Milwaukee and Atlanta. And it was just a really great opportunity that we'll be able to build on from here on out. So this is the what, right? This is what we do. I want to share how we do it. And just quickly, I'm not taking you all to school right now, but we follow a version of Stanford's design thinking process. So if you think about empathizing, defining, ideating, this is all like a process that was originally designed in the tech space, right? And so what we're doing is we're taking this way of creating and putting it in the human space, right? And so we start with empathizing. That's what the team is doing right now. They're listening. Fancy word, empathizing is listening, right? Developing an understanding, talking to the community in their own voice, you know, being very exact in reporting and understanding what the community is saying. We then move into defining, and that's just essentially what is the problem? What are the solutions, right? Based specifically on what we heard, not what we think, right? Like not what we heard in a newspaper article 3 years ago, but what we're hearing from families right now. And we're going to design from that space, define from that space. We move into ideating, fancy word for thinking, right? We think, we brainstorm, we go through creative ways to invent solutions based on what we've listened and defined from our community. And then the last 2 steps, the prototyping and testing, is kind of like a cycle, right? Where we try something and then we test it and see if it works. Then we try something else and we test it in small batches, right? So we're not asking the team to develop initially, you know, a county-wide program and then implement it and test it. We're saying with a family, you know, with 10 families, try this strategy, right? With this program in an elementary school, try this strategy, test it, and see if there's something that we could take and apply to a larger construct, right? So this is the how. This is the how, what we're doing. And so this is a picture, we love seeing this. This is a picture of our cohort 3. These are all of our folks from across the country that we've been working with. Just wanted to emphasize how we selected Orange County and our other teams. They had to apply, right? It was a national application. It was open for it was a pretty short window. We asked the teams to put something together that was pretty elaborate. So, you know, Kathleen and Melanie and Dina, they were probably asking you all, hey, we need something. We need you to talk to this person. We need some information. And that was all to prepare for their application. So we received applications from around the country. We interviewed each team on Zoom. We had them walk us through their application. We had them tell us about Orange County. And then we came, if it wasn't COVID, we would have come to Orange County and talked with folks in person. But we held Zoom calls and we learned more about the community. We talked to Dr. Felder. We talked to Ms. Doyle, right? Like we talked to the mayor of Hillsborough. And we talked with members of the community that were able to give us a sense of what are the intrinsic issues in the county right now. And from that, Orange County was selected. They kind of, to be true, Orange County kind of came out of nowhere for us. Like we weren't expecting, usually we hear from districts, it's like, oh, we're going to apply. And Orange County came, we were like, wow, right? And it was really refreshing to see the application, to hear how they were talking about some of the issues, and we'll talk about that in a second. So these are our cohorts. This is the entire group. This is our team from Richmond, awesome team representing Richmond Public Schools, kind of our neighbors, close-ish, right? We have folks in Yakima, Washington, not close, working with some migrant populations and communities in Washington. We have Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore is unique because they're looking at a small community within Baltimore Public Schools, right? And so that's a new kind of model for us, and it's moving without me. And of course, we have Orange County. And this is your wonderful team that has really been working hard to get started and to move along. The PowerPoint deck is moving without me. It's saying we need to move, so I will follow the PowerPoint's lead. So why Orange County? I wanted to highlight 4 quotes from the Orange County application that really spoke to us. And that really gave us a sense of, as you can see here in this quote, the leadership support, right? So when we talk about real family engagement, that L is so important. And Dr. Felder, she was clearly involved in the process. She was clearly a supporter of this work. I talked with her myself through the application process. She was mentioned several times in the application, and it was just clear that there was a support and an empowerment from the superintendent's office to really make this work happen. We really appreciated the intentionality behind Orange County to have conversations about race, right? And the time frame that we're in right now, and I heard some of the conversations before I jumped on, just about the importance of understanding how race is playing a role in our accounting community now. And then next, this quote really highlights the history of what's happened in Orange County and what's been happening across the country that has really been on full display in the last year, right? Understanding what's happening now and speaking to it and saying our Black families, our Latinx families aren't being engaged in the way we think they should. And then also saying we understand why, based on the history of our county, of the state, of the country, and really speaking to that, I think is really strong and is really bold. And we really thought that was awesome. And then the commitment to listening, right? That is something that we saw throughout the application process. And specifically Orange County really stood out in that space. And honestly, the size of Orange County, was really helpful. It was ideal for change, right? Like we can, it's a county that's big enough where there could be an impact, and small enough where there can be an impact, right? Where we can make a change at one school and see a ripple effect throughout the county. We thought that that was really important for the county and for the state, for your neighbors over here in Wake, and folks across in the area. So I'm going to stop here. I have a closing activity-ish that I want us to talk through. Are there any questions, any highlights for the folks that are on the team? Did I forget anything? And then we'll go into our discussion where I'm going to stop talking, I promise. Excellent. I wanted to highlight who we spoke to specifically when we interviewed Orange County. We followed up their team interview and we spoke with, just so that you're aware, we spoke with Ms. Renee Price, who's a chair in the Orange County Commission. We talked to Andrea Melendez, who's on the Orange County Literacy Council. We talked with Carrie Doyle, I see her on here. We talked with Susan Clifford, who's Human Rights and Relation Department with Orange County. And we talked with Dr. Felder. And we've interviewed so many people for this fellowship, and not always are we able to get a call or a conversation with the superintendent. And so we really appreciated Dr. Felder taking the time out to talk with us, because that's not always the case when we're interviewing folks, and that showed a lot of commitment. So my last slide, and this is, we're almost going to take you through an activity or a thought process that we have had with our fellows. And I want you to take a look at this picture and tell me, have you seen this picture before? Has anyone seen a version of this picture before, where you have, a baseball game being played, you have a fence, you have boxes that represent what they represent, and then we're talking about equality and equity. Have we seen this image before?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want you to do, I want to add another image, and I want us to think about equality. I want us to think about equity, and I want us to think about what liberation means in this context, and what roles are we all playing in this? First, before we jump into roles, what do the different things on the screen represent to you? Anybody can come off of mute and just, let's start with the game that's being played. What does that represent to us when we look at it?
I think that's life opportunities, like just the opportunity to live the life you want.
Okay. No wrong answers. I like that answer. Life. Yep. What else? What
Being part of the community, getting to see the game or watch the game is being part of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the game is kind of like life, right? Like we're the community we live in, what we're seeing, what's happening. Now, what do the boxes represent? What do we think?
Access and opportunities.
Yeah. Access, opportunities, resources. Yeah, absolutely. And how about the fence? What might the fence represent?
Barriers.
Right? Things that are getting in the way. So I'm going to ask that's the surface question, right? I'm going to get a little bit deeper, right? Where do we see ourselves in this picture? Where do we see Orange County? where does the school board sit in this picture? Where do our schools fit in this picture? And how are we moving towards a liberation mindset, right? Like, how are we thinking about that as a county, as a school board? And this week, there's no wrong answers here. Just want to get you thinking about this morning.
Well, a school board has some influence over the amount of resources and how they're distributed. And then I think also has a role in, well, in creating barriers in the first place or not, but then also in that last picture in establishing sort of a vision and expectation for the district around what we hope for students. So I see the students in the last picture are empowered to take down those barriers themselves and are supporting each other. And I think the school board has a role in sort of the overarching, like, what do we want to be true in our district?
Yeah, definitely, Sarah. I like that. I like that.
I think the vision is expanding a little bit, and I include my own ability. The vision has shifted for me too, as my understanding has developed a little bit. I think we're all pretty clear with, that equality doesn't cut it. As you can see, the fence is bigger. The person on the right has both a taller fence and a lower ground. So, equality doesn't cut it. And I think we're all really familiar with equity as a concept. I think we're, speaking for myself, still learning to see like the many places where things aren't equitable. And I think it really is challenging some old mindsets, speaking for myself, that I was raised with. And then I think liberation's like the next frontier. And I think it's important that we keep challenging our vision and not stop at equity. And we had a conversation earlier this morning about like community participation in board meetings, or community representation in board membership. That was kind of along these themes. And I think we're still challenging our vision to see the liberation piece.
Absolutely, Carrie. Liberation is a powerful word, right? When we presented this image to our cohort 2, the last cohort before this one, we didn't have liberation on there, right? Like, even our own mindsets were thinking that equity is good, like equity is okay, right? You're absolutely right. Liberation, like, we need to think about that. There are some shifts that need to happen in our work, in what we think, how we think, to really understand what liberation means. And so I want to end there with asking, what does liberation look like in Orange County? Right? Like, if we're, thinking of liberation like as a definition, but then also like almost like metaphorically, what does that mean and look like in Orange County?
So I'll jump in with a couple of thoughts. I think liberation, one of the things that would be meaning that we were closing in on liberation, whatever that means, would be that your success was not, we wouldn't be able to predetermine your likeliness for success based on race or socioeconomic status. Every student who walked in our door would have the same opportunities in our district. And one of the things that Dr. Felder and I have been talking a lot about recently is a culture of trust. And I think that when we are closer to liberation, there will be more trust among stakeholders here. And so I sort of like to think of these things as like liberation would be sort of the ideal destination. And these conversations we have about equity are the processes we use to sort of break down barriers and march towards liberation.
I love that. I love that reference to trust. So that is the key to liberation, right? Like there can't be liberation without developing and working on trust in the community. So absolutely. Anybody else?
I struggle all the time with the notion of urgency, because when I look at this, I say there's a game going on there, and actually the game is changing, and I worry that by the time we move from, I really think we're to the left of this diagram. I'm not even sure that we are practicing equality, but the game is going on, and how long will it take us to create urgency so that we don't miss the game? And the game's changing too. Let's talk about that. But urgency has always been missing from this conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. I agree. I agree with you. The game is changing. I love that. I feel like for this image, we need to like change the game in every image. Like it's baseball, then it's basketball, then it's something else, right? Because that's so accurate. And when you talk about being left of equality, I think that emphasizes the role that history plays in all of this, like in our work. And acknowledging that history is a part of building and establishing and centering trust, right? Like how do we create and build trust is acknowledging that this is where we were, this is where we are, and saying intentionally, this is where we're going, right? This is not where we want to go. This is where we are definitely going, and making sure that the work aligns with that. Excellent. Well,
Mike, yeah, I know it's not my session. I'm supposed to be quiet, but
can't do it. Can't.
I just can't. Oh my gosh, I gotta work on myself. So like in that picture, like when I think about the game, and I like how you said the game is changing, but I also think with liberation, like do the students or the families, those who are on the margins, have a say in what game is being played? Or are they always just trying to get access to somebody else's game? So I also think about in liberation, it's not like if the game is education, for example, I'm not just trying to bring you into my game of education. I'm trying to build this game with you. What are the rules that we're going to set together? Who's going to take what positions, as opposed to you just got to learn my rules. All I did was give you access to my rules and my game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what's interesting is that the game of baseball, if we want to get even more technical, I love the metaphor. There's so many metaphors and analogies in this image. My son plays baseball, and baseball is the exact sport to show on this on this image, because there's so many rules, right? There's intentional rules. There's kind of rules that you should know, but no one really tells you. Then there's like unspoken rules. You can't flip your bat, like you can't do all these things, right? But you're absolutely right, Dina. Like the students and families, if we're having a liberatory mindset, should be co-constructing the game, right? They should be building it together, and especially when it comes to education. And that, I believe, I think COVID is teaching us that right now in a real shortened, intense way, that the schools and the districts that had really strong relationships with families prior to COVID it was easier for them to transition into remote, right, or to this hybrid. For the schools that weren't, and for the leaders that didn't have connections with families, they really struggled last year. right? From that March till about September, it was really hard. Where are students? We don't know. What are they doing? Are they coming to school? We don't know. Do they have internet? We don't know, right? So I think that we're learning that we need to do this together with families, not to families, right? So I'm at my time. I'm here to answer any questions, to provide any perspective. We work with the team every 3 weeks, so we see them often. If you want to stop by in our meetings and say hello, please feel free. But I thank you for this time, and we really just want to say like how much it is a privilege to be working with Orange County, and you know, it was an intense selection process. So outside of the members on the team, the school board and anybody that's watching should recognize that it was competitive and Orange County stood out, and stood out for a reason. There's work to be done, and we really think that the team is, and that the community is right for this to happen and to do now. So we thank you for your time. If you want to contact us, you could visit our website, Twitter and all that stuff, Facebook. But you can reach out to me directly. We love to continue the conversation, and we hope to be back soon and talk with you about all the great work that Orange County is doing.
Thanks so much for taking the time to come to our meeting and share about Flamboyan Fellowship and this cohort. I'm so excited that Orange County is part of it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Any final question? Are y'all needing to say goodbye? Or are you waiting for questions? Like,
for us, if there are any questions, we'll head on out. If there aren't any questions, we'll head on out. And just thank you. Appreciate you.
I have one question, and if y'all need to go, Dr. Keel to tell us, but I was curious how we've heard some about the interview process for the landscape analysis, and I was wondering, do y'all have an update on how that is developing?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that the team has been listening to families, to groups across the county. Melanie and Dina, I see Kathleen is on. You could talk into more specifics, but we have been working with the team to, identify like what questions do we really want to ask this group, right? Like how do we really want to get what we need to hear, what we want to hear from the different groups of folks. So the listening is starting, and if you want to speak into more detail, team, you can.
Well, I'll just add, thank you. Yes, we started meeting with what originally was a group of faith-based leaders in our Black communities. And as part of that invitation, we said, hey, invite someone in your congregation, not just you, bring someone along. And I think that was a recommendation from Flamboyan, that we've done so much work, I can't keep up. And so we just got to the point in meeting with them every month. We just got to the point where they've given us a list of folks to connect with. And it's not just our Black families, but it also includes our Hispanic families. And we have questions that we've developed, and we are now conducting one-on-one interviews and focus groups. And the folks as part of that call have been key, because they also point out and advise us who shouldn't be the interviewer. It's really very well thought out and intentional. And so we're doing that now, Ms. Doyle. And I will make sure that we're providing someone on our team will provide an update in your board weekly update, and just follow up with you accordingly. And Mike, I can't thank you enough for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Can I just say well, I'm very grateful. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Andrews, and I'm grateful that we're a part of this cohort, but I am just so grateful to you all, our team, Ms. Stowe, Dr. Keeling, and everybody on the team. This has been the most intense year ever, and we decided to apply for this, which was a difficult, an involved process, but it's also never been more needed. And so just so much gratitude for what you're doing and starting these conversations. I know that trust process and building is going to take time, but I just feel so hopeful about this approach and the work you all are doing. So thank you.
I just wanted to add just one thing real quick, and I do want to thank Michael and Kyle. Thank you so much for your time today. The other piece, I want us to all also know that we're not just focusing on our ethnic and racial demographics, right? We're being inclusive of other areas of underrepresented groups. And so it's not just about race. We do have families that I know, just having worked with some of our families, and I know, Dina, you have as well, some of our students that are LGBTQ, families as well, and in those categories as well. So I just want us to know that we're being broader in our family and community engagement, and it's not just about our racial and ethnic groups.
Thank you for all that. And I really appreciate hearing all this today. In addition to the cultural challenges that we're talking about, we have some pretty serious challenges of poverty and that extend to healthcare, mental health, trauma. And I was curious how that plays into this work. And then in addition, we have Orange County has a Family Success Alliance, which was modeled around the Harlem Children's Zone and more of a healthcare outreach for families. And they kind of did it the other way. They put navigators in community, and those navigators are bringing the community back into the institution. So it's kind of an opposite model. We have it working in our New Hope community, mostly Hispanic. It's working really well, just curious how that all fits with this. And I don't know if that's a question to our staff or if it's a question to the Flamboyan group, but curious.
Ms. Hauser, I'm glad you brought that up. We do meet with the family navigators, success navigators, our family liaisons, myself. I know Dr. Keeling, meet with them once a month. And so we do ensure we're coordinating our efforts. And there are areas where what we're doing is the same mission. And so we don't need to duplicate efforts. And so we do meet with them once a month.
One other thing I will add is this past week when we met with, I know it's not called the faith-based group. I think it's just a group of community partners. Let's just call it that. Let's call it a group of community partners. We've met with them, I think 3 times. I think this was our 3rd time meeting. And this was the first time that we had a slight breakthrough with them. And I say that to say that the mistrust in the community is so deep that if you think you're going to go in and have an interview and get some, whatever it is you came in there to get, you are sorely mistaken. And so I just needed people to understand, and in that meeting was the first time that they were able to really say that the biggest issue is that we don't talk about race enough in Orange County schools. And because of that, it is actually pushing people further to the margin. And because there is this lack of trust, even the questions that we came to the table with, they shot down our questions. And we were like, wait a minute, put these questions together with Flamboyan. And now I'm like, I said to Melanie, okay, we have to regroup. We got to talk to Mike. We got to talk to Kyle because we got to run these questions back through them. And that's like the awesomeness of having Mike and Kyle and being in the fellowship, is to be able to what Mike said, you go out there, it didn't work. We got to come back and we got to regroup. And so it's like now, like I just was saying, sent Melanie an email, like we have to show them like the video, because we're going to need to process this with them, because even the questions, they're like, you're getting at questions about what you want. You haven't even bothered to like ask people what they need and what they want. Because if you're going in here just coming with your own agenda, that's not going to work, you know? So, and I just say that to say about like the deep rooted issues of mistrust, but also like the overwhelming benefit of being in this fellowship, to be able to have these thought partners to go back and to regroup and to help us to know what we need to do differently.
That's so insightful. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Keeling.
Well, if there aren't any more questions for us or anything you need us to elaborate on, we're going to say goodbye. I'm close by, so you know, I might stop by the school board meeting next time, and you know, whenever we're able to get together in person, I'm looking forward to meeting everybody. Kyle, thank you, and team. We'll see y'all in a few weeks.
Mike and Kyle, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing
you.
everything. It's very exciting, encouraging.
No problem. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Wow, that was really great. And as Sarah said, thank you for our team, which includes Dr. Dawson and Ms. Stowe and Dr. Keeling and Emily Elstad and Stan Farrington and Sandra Blefko. Great. Okay, so I think Jennifer, I see Jennifer. Good morning. We can do a quick break if people need a break. So who would like a break, and to pick up at 11? We can touch on what we shared earlier about the plan with the EC piece, because we wanted your input on that, Jennifer. And also then we have a topic that I think we have plenty of time for, relating to board engagement, virtual office hours, push notifications, public comment. So would people like a break for a few minutes, or would you rather keep going?
I don't need one.
Okay, let's keep going, and feel free to take a break if you need to. And Will, do you want to summarize what we talked about earlier this morning?
Sure. So Jennifer, we talked about a recommendation of moving forward with getting a ad hoc committee to go look at the Chapel Hill snack program, use their bylaws as a starting point, and look at how we would modify those to meet our community needs and make sure we get representation from the different parts of our community to figure out what would work best for Orange County community. And also at the same time, Connie was going to have some education sessions that she wanted to start independent of that, just to do some outreach to some of our community. And really some of the things we wanted to just get your thoughts on was, one, your thoughts about snack, and did you have anything that you would like to see or make sure that that committee would look at and come back with or think about through the process?
No, Mr. Atherton. I think as long as we tailor everything for our district and our children and their families, I think that will That would be very good. In the past, when I worked at a total EC school in Wayne County, and um, for parents, we involved the ARC of North Carolina. They provided a lot of training on like guardianship, um, IEPs. It was just a variety of things. We noticed that in Wayne County at that time, once the students got to high school, they didn't get a lot of information regarding like guardianship, or the parents didn't. They didn't get that information. It seems like they get a lot of information in elementary school. So I think that would be great, and I'll be happy to help any way you need me to.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. I know that, Connie and Dr. Felder will be setting up, and I'm looking forward to helping out as well. I'm excited, and the intent is to not go 90 miles an hour, but to slowly think this through and make sure we do it right and make sure we have engagement from all.
I agree.
Excellent.
Yeah, and Jennifer, one of the comments that Crimmins made, which was helpful to me because I'm not as familiar with some of the challenges in the EC community. We want to make sure that we start slowly so we have a diverse group of parents, both racially and socioeconomically, and also, Ms. Crimmins was pointing out differences in what those special needs look like, that special needs includes a wide variety of, abilities and disabilities. And so there really is a lot to think about informing that group. Do you have experience to share about how to do that?
Hold on, Carrie. I'm trying to navigate through some notes. So basically, we partnered with, like I say, the ARC of North Carolina and the Autism Society. And through those organizations, we would have speakers to come out, give education workshops, notebook training on like a guide, a guide to use in case something happened to a parent. The next person would know how to, take care of that child as far as their educational needs, IEP training, advocacy training, disability rights, vocational training as well, and Social Security Administration training for SSI. So those are some different things we did. We just partnered with those organizations. I still have close relationships with both of those organizations, and I'll be happy to share any information with you if you would like.
Okay, that's great. Is that kind of how we left it then, Will? We talked about, did we want to have like almost board involvement in the model? And I think you touched on this, but we said no, we'd rather that Dr. Felder and Ms. Crimmins take the lead, and that over time we may have a board liaison, but that we don't want this under like the structure of the board.
Yeah, we didn't want this to be board managed, if you will. But if board members wanted to participate, they could, and that we would have a future meeting that would just discuss any additional ideas or thoughts as this started. We didn't want to wait for that board meeting to get it started.
Okay, great. Did you have any questions, Jennifer? Or is that a good place to leave it for now?
I don't have any more questions.
Okay, so I have kind of some notes here. I don't have anything to virtually share, but we have a number of topics that have come up and that it's good to check back in on regarding board engagement, especially since we just have a couple more of these. I'm going to be really sad when these committee meetings come to an end. I've enjoyed them. But first, we wanted to check in on the virtual office hours effort. The hours, just as a reminder for anybody listening,
hours are once a month. They're on Saturday mornings. There's a rotation of 2 board members by alphabetical order. The information about the office hours and opportunity for translation is posted about a week in advance of the meeting. And for board members, we have a Google Doc of suggested guidelines that Ms. Stowe and Ms. Stevenson helped draft. Will and I did the January and office hours, and those were successful, and Hillary and Bonnie did the February ones, and those were successful. I feel like I think we all felt like there was a lot of participation, and it was a great outlet for people to share, and we took notes and we shared them. So we're really thankful for that ongoing team effort. The March office hours I saw were scheduled for tomorrow morning. It's up to the board members when they choose to schedule it in the month, and Jennifer and Sarah scheduled them for tomorrow. They're on the website. April is scheduled for Ms. Stevens and Mr. Etherton, and May is scheduled for me and Bonnie. And so one question I have is, does anyone have any issues that they've seen emerge from the office hours or any suggestions?
I would just say the representation has been disproportionate. And I wonder if we should make an effort to maybe host one of the office hours very specifically targeting a community. When I was in office hours, we actually did one with Holy Family, with their Hispanic. We did it actually after church with their Hispanic population. I just don't know if we should target that group. We had a translator. So anyway, I just think we need to look at who's attending and even how we're announcing it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bonnie. And I know we've talked about with Ms. Stowe that we do want to have, I think, so I've heard some feedback that it's nice to have the virtual office hours because in a way that makes it really accessible for people maybe who need to be home with little kids or whatever it is on a Saturday morning. There's an accessibility piece to how we're doing it. So it's almost like, what can we add? Another venue. I don't know if it would still be called office hours or if it's something else, but where we, and I mentioned Ms. Stowe, we talked about doing something out in Cedar Grove. So how do we add in other listening type sessions, and what do we call those? And are they the same? Are they something different where we're targeting specific communities?
Well, it's clear we've got the feedback. We need to meet people where they are. So I think we've got to figure it out. Even early on, as Bonnie brought up earlier, I get frustrated at us getting to that next step and taking action. And so we can see the progress. So I'm all in support of us looking at how we can engage and listen. And, even Dr. Keeling's point of, should we be going out asking questions or going out listening and hearing their questions to us, not what we want to ask the community? So I think those are very good points that we need to incorporate in and start this engagement, and just put a stake in the ground and say, we're going to do one here and learn from that one and go forward. And I think the Flamboyant work that everyone's doing, we can leverage that to understand what would be most effective instead of us trying to figure out on our own, of course. But other thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think that it's going to be a lot of like figuring out what works by trying different things. I think it could be useful. We've started these virtual office hours. I mean, maybe it's that, they're virtual for the time being, but in the future we have, one Saturday at Eflin Cedar Grove, one Saturday and, like all over the place. So I don't know. I mean, I think we just try different venues for public comment and see, or not public comment, like office hours type of more casual conversation, I guess is what I'm thinking. And I also think that office hours is a good vehicle for this because it doesn't require a lot of staff time or planning. And I think that that's important for us to keep in mind, that we don't keep piling on what we are asking of our staff.
So, like, for example, and I don't know what we, at some point, it's not just what our committee decides, it's what the whole board decides and other input, but, do we continue these office hours then through the end of the year, which I'd like to do, because I think they're working. And for this spring, do we also come up with like 2 or something locations that we go to where we're adding in, and then do we do something different in the fall? Do we decide, September's virtual and October's in person and November's virtual and December's, how do we decide how we want to implement what we're talking about? And do we change what we're doing or stop what we're doing with the virtual ones or alternate or what?
Why don't we add, right? If we can, I mean, I'd be happy to set up another Holy Family. We did it after their mass. We didn't do it when we wanted to do it. We did it when they were there. So we could set up meetings at their convenience. A lot of churches are still not back. So hopefully as they begin to come back, we might be able to go to an after church session. Maybe I'm thinking Mount Zion would be a great place to go. But we could just go, right? And listen, say, well, hey, we're here. What do you have to say? And presumably we're welcome. And then see, and maybe we as we do these, one of the things we should always ask is, does this work? Or is there a different way you would like us to engage with you? So that would be, that's just, so I don't know, we have to, I don't feel comfortable. We're so much transition. I don't feel comfortable now trying to figure out how this is going to work in June. I'm trying to kind of know how we should work it through the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think virtual makes sense through the rest of the year too. That's what you're saying, Bonnie, right?
Well, if we're welcome to go to Holy Family now, I would go as soon as they want. I'm not gonna, or Mount Zion, they may open up with vaccinations happening. They may open up, in a month or two. Well, we have to find out. But I'm just saying that I don't think we have to, I don't think we have the basis for any longer term planning than what we're doing right now. If I'd be open to just be looking for opportunities to do some more.
I would be interested in us making like a Google Doc for the board of where we are interested in targeting some of these sessions and thinking a little more strategically about like how and when we want to do it, because one-offs are great and I'm not down on those at all. But if we want this to be like a system that we can carry into the future and carry beyond our own terms on this board, then I think we need to build relationships in a strategic way and, figure out who, which families we're targeting, where we want to try to meet and set up expectations around like, well, every month we go somewhere and here's how it's divided up through the county, sort of a thing. Just a thought, but.
Well, are you wanting to say something? You just came off mute there. I don't know.
If I did, it wasn't intentional.
Okay.
All I'll say is I agree that we should only plan for what we know right now. I think anything past that, things are changing so quickly, and that's just my thought. We should plan for what we can see, not past that.
Okay, so let's definitely plan for the virtual office hours that we have sketched out, which go into June. And I don't know if the people on June feel like, let's see, so it's going to be Bonnie and I in May. June would be Hillary and Jennifer, I think. But I don't know if June already feels like, you know, for my family, we're kind of dealing with, there might be graduation and other stuff. So I don't know if June feels like a month people can't do. I don't know. One of the questions I have is, do people want to take a break in July, resume in August before school starts? What are your feelings about doing it June and July and August?
I think with,
and I'm just talking, hold on, Bonnie, I'm sorry. And I'm just talking about the virtual office hours part. I do want to come back to the in-person, but just in terms of our planning, continuing with the virtual, do people want to do it through the summer?
Like, I'm willing to do it if we have things going on that folks want to talk about, but my guess is most people are going to be pretty checked out, at least in July. But if we hear otherwise, I'm more than glad to participate.
Will, do you have an opinion on the summer virtual office hours?
I mean, we're going to be having summer school, so I think there is an opportunity to have one then. But you know, past that time frame, I don't know if it'll be that effective, because I think several people are going to want to disconnect. And I'm not talking about the school board, I'm talking about the community, you know. But I'm open to doing it, like Hillary said, if the community would like it. But I think for the summer, at least while we have summer school, we should probably do one, you know, since we do have some activities going on. But past that, I'd leave it open to community feedback.
So it sounds like I'm on for June, so I can certainly reach out. You know, we can also make sure that schools know to tell families in summer school that there's virtual office hours or something like that, since it's just it'll probably be a smaller number of families involved.
yeah, you know, are the schools announcing the office? Or
I don't necessarily think they are for right now, but I just.
I would like a little pull on this. I would like to hear a little bit of feedback from, you know, if parents want to more time with us, you know. So I'm with let's see what happens over the next couple of months, and if people want more, let's keep going. And if they don't, or if they want it different, or if there are groups that would like to see it, I mean, why would, you know, let's show up for them. You know, I'm really open to be a little flexible in such a challenging time.
So, okay, so I think what we will do, and I hear what you're saying, Bonnie, and I agree that that's good to be flexible. I think we should keep our plan. In terms of the August one, it could always be done, you know, later in August. It doesn't have to be second Saturday or whatever. So as we get close to the start of the school year, I have a feeling people will have questions. And so I think we can plan on going through the summer as long as, you know, board members can find an agreeable time to do it that works for them in those summer months. And so another thing I just wanted to touch back on that Hillary mentioned, and we had a conversation about this. I'm sure a lot of us are feeling like with the vaccinations and the weather getting nicer, some of us are finding us out more in the community a little bit more. And for example, one of the elementary schools had like a yard day thing. And Jennifer and I stopped by that. And so we had this conversation around Hillary and I followed up with a conversation about the Google Docs idea that in addition to these virtual office hours, which are kind of predictable and scheduled, that if we sometime this spring start tracking like what school events that are going on, because for me as a parent, it's been sort of random. Like I might stop by something that my kids at my kids' school, or someone from one of the schools invites board members to something. I might stop by, but I might not know about others or might not be able to stop by. So the idea of working towards having a document where we all are kind of seeing what's going on in the different schools, and you know, someone can put a note in there that they're planning on stopping by or not, and we can kind of see what's getting visited or not. That's not exactly the same thing that that was brought up about scheduling office hours in other locations, which I'm open to as well, but just as another opportunity to be at different parts of the community.
So we just have to be careful on this, and we need to get legal advice, because that's an online meeting that people don't have access to. If just the board has access to it and we can edit it and change it. And one of the ways that this was being done before is the superintendent would collect all of them and put those as, here are things that are going on in the district. You know, whether a board member sent it or an individual someone in the school or the district sent it in, and it would be included weekly, so we would always see it. We just have to be very careful with that, because if it is a document we're all editing, it is an online meeting.
So I think it could just be an uneditable thing that our new board specialist managed for us and added events, and that way folks would just know what was happening where.
Yeah.
Eva, if you're listening in, I mean, if we all had editing privileges and we were just posting events on a Google Doc, would that be something we wouldn't be able to do? You're on mute.
If you're just sharing information and not going back and forth with each other about, wait, that shouldn't be included, or should a board member go to this, or then I think it's okay. It's just, if it's like a message board, it would be equivalent to you sending each other emails.
So read only. So read only would be the item that would help us with that.
If you want to talk about whether something needs to be on there, then I would have that conversation. I would call that person. Yeah. And have that.
Well, if it was something where we like could add events, like if I hear about something that isn't on there, I think it would be nice if we could add stuff. I mean, as long as we're not doing business and we're just listing events, you're saying that's okay?
Yes.
And then I have a question, because I mentioned two of us stopped by this yard day. So when does it matter, you know, let's say there's an event at Cedar Ridge, and well, this has happened already and at Cedar Ridge, so I guess it's fine, but when does it matter how many of us are there? If we're literally just stopping by, you know,
it doesn't.
When does that come into play?
Yeah, more than a public meeting or an official meeting is when you have a majority gathered to do the board's business, which includes, you know, discussing or making decisions, that sort of thing, deliberating. So showing up, all of you at a social event is fine. Everybody taking a car together to go to Greensboro for a conference is fine. Don't make any decisions in that car about the school system, you know, talk about the weather, but yeah, just being together is fine. It's when you start deliberating or making decisions that you need to do that in a meeting.
Okay, thanks. It's funny that you said that. I know the county commissioners are real, like if they go to a party, if more than the majority of county commissioners go to a party, they notice it, you know.
Well, that is an abundance of caution that I admire.
Okay, so I think at this point, and we can revisit this in future months, but I think at this point, we're going to keep the virtual office hours pretty much as is.
this summer. Thank you, Eva and Melanie, for helping us with those guidelines to begin with. And then we, as the spring goes on, may be able to have this location where we post events so that we all can kind of see the different things available to stop by and be available in the community that way. And if we decide to do something beyond that, a formal listening session, that we're going to come back to that. We're not going to take that on this morning. I have two other questions, and this is, Eva, we appreciate you being here today. One has to do with push notifications, and I think there was a lot of favorable feeling about this. And so this would be public notifications for people who have signed up to receive them, and possibly they'll receive them by email or text, of things like board meetings, board office hours, agenda postings, and Will suggested this potentially could be organized via Assembly. Is this something we want to do? And if so, when would it be reasonable for staff to consider adding this function?
I'll start off. 100% yes. 100% yes. This is the most transparent way that we can have people have information delivered to them versus them trying to figure it out. So one of the most common questions I get is, how do I know what's on the agenda? How do I find out when a meeting is? And right now, you know, they have to keep looking on our site and refreshing, or know one of us, for them to find out. And it is trivial to do. So just my opinion, I'll leave it there.
I completely agree. I think it'd be great. I think we need to, I think Melanie's here. She'd probably be a good person to ask about how reasonable it is to implement this. I think when the board, maybe when we have a new board specialist, that would be something they could help with also. I'm thinking, I mean, I would like to do it as soon as possible, but also with respect for everything going on, maybe we aim for the next school year to get that up and running. What are your thoughts, Melanie?
Well, first, I think it's a great idea. And I think, because I've heard your conversation and what we're dealing with communication, particularly with our schools and families, is some people, they know what they want, and sometimes they know what they don't want. And so that's our text messaging system that we're using at the district level that we're implementing now, allows them to opt in and out of certain things. They can't opt out of a weather notice, because one day we'll all be back, I hope. And we need you to know that. But with regards to board notifications, there needs to be the opportunity, not just for families, but for stakeholders to opt in and out. I do not know how Assembly works with that, but I'll definitely add that to my list. And if Assembly can't do it, then there are systems that can, and a board specialist or whomever could definitely set that up so that if it doesn't matter who they are, any stakeholder says, I want to know every board meeting, every committee meeting, I want to get a notification, and they would receive that.
Yeah, Melanie, the thought I had just from the technology side is, not that Assembly could do it, but what you could do is set up a list server where, like you're saying, people check what they want, and each one is a different list serve. And then what happens is Assembly sends it to that list serve, and then you don't have to manage, how do I figure it out? But I'd highly recommend the county has a system in place. Not that we should or could or would use it, but they have one that you go on, and they have, just like you're saying, here are the 5 things or 10 things that you can subscribe to, and you select it. And every email at the bottom, it puts a header on there and says, if you'd like to unsubscribe, click here. But anyway, I had thought about Assembly as well, because we don't own it. Like, we can't control what they do or don't do, but at least we could put a email address in there that would push to the list server. Anyway, sorry.
Well, should we, so Hillary mentioned maybe the start of the school year. Do you want to give us some, is there any need for it to be, is everyone okay with us waiting till the beginning of the school year? And should we wait and see what feedback we get from Melanie or others in terms of doing something sooner, or is it just fine to wait?
I would like to know what's involved, because honestly, there's so much happening And now that I wonder if our parents would be, and our stakeholders would be better served if we can get this up and running sooner. So, you know, because there are so many moving parts. But if it's a burden on the staff and it's just too much, then I'd certainly be happy to wait.
I think it would be fair to investigate and see, is this a heavy or a light push? Because I agree, if it's as simple as setting up a listserv and, you know, Melanie comes back and says, yep, we can set up a listserv with our ISP, and, you know, we're talking 2 days to do that, you know. But if she comes back and says, yeah, well, we have some different problems, it's going to take longer, then we just hear how we would do it, you know. Anyway, just my thoughts from the technology part.
Yeah, I agree. I will investigate and find out. I don't think that you ever postpone communicating if it's an easy lift. Like, there's no need to postpone being an effective communicator.
Thanks, Melanie. Could maybe next week in the weekly update, you could give us like an update of what you find out. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. So another topic is, I think I'm moving on from push notifications. I think we're good with that. Is public comment. And so we currently have oral public comment with translation service provided. And so a question I have, and has come up in a variety of ways from a number of us, do we want to consider adding in the opportunity for written submission of public comment? So just as an aside, I reached out to someone from Durham Public Schools because they have an opportunity for written public comment. And I asked someone there how exactly that works. And she said they typically set a deadline of 3 to 5 hours before the board meeting for submissions. Their PR staff has guidelines from their attorney about what needs to be redacted, but they are pretty open with public comment in general. They make sure to have Spanish, and we might have other languages, translated and posted as well. And so I had noticed this at one of their board meetings, is that they have a staff member read these aloud. And she said that when they have a lot of public comment, then they'll limit, they'll read for 30 minutes. And so when necessary, that means reading 30 seconds of each submission. And she invited our staff to reach out to their staff if they have logistical questions. So my question is thoughts about that in terms of like adding in the opportunity for, and this kind of comes from your original suggestion, Bonnie, and I might be framing it in a slightly different way, but if we keep our oral comment, do we also want to have a way for people to submit written comment that either could be read aloud or Hillary had a thought about this as well. So I'm going to open it up for people to share their ideas and feelings. And I know Hillary had some too.
Can I jump in for a sec? I want to note that I believe that system was developed specifically because of the transition to remote board meetings. And I think that's been true in other boards as well. So one thing to consider is, are you coming up with another way for people to participate because you're meeting remotely? And do you anticipate returning to in-person board meetings? You know, and is this something that, so sort of thinking about those two different scenarios.
Yeah, and you're right. And the woman from Durham Public Schools said that was the case, that this was, I think they just had their first back in person meeting and that this was a strategy. So she said it could change for them as well. So that's a good point.
So when I was thinking about it, I look at all the emails that we get, and sometimes I feel like people are saying important things, but it goes into kind of a black hole, or black hole, if you will. And I feel like some of the comments, assuming that it doesn't involve an individual student or teacher, but some of these comments, I think it would benefit the public if they knew what their peers were asking us. So I was thinking about all communication to the board that's not private, be put online as technically as public comment. So I was thinking about it a little bit more broadly than just meeting topics and agenda topics, but really all communication to the board.
Eva, can you share your thoughts about that more broad suggestion just before we take it down further towards more like public comment?
Sure. So if you're looking at, I mean, of course, in general, your emails are public records should someone request them. They do, however, contain confidential information. And so I think in looking at whether there might be electronic public comment or electronic sort of posting of everything that people send to you. Anytime somebody wanted to like post your emails online, we'd have to go through and take out especially individual student information and also personnel. And that's something I did look at the commissioners and the way they have their like public email address that's posted on the website. They don't have this confidential student information issue that you have. And I think, in looking at FERPA, it talks about student information that's confidential in a student record is any record that's maintained by the school system anywhere, not just in the student's file. So I think that if you were to have something where people could just, I don't know that you could have it unmoderated, which is potentially a lot of work depending on how many messages you get. I understand that they have like a public comment email address, I think in some places, which is definitely something you could do, but then they have a separate email address for someone who wants to just email the members of the board. You see, so I think, like if you started to have your current board email address just be automatically public, Dr. Felder would then have to create a separate way to contact you about confidential things, and I would too. So it would kind of require having two. So I do think, that if you're going to have something where public comments are automatically posted, as Durham said, they redact them first, not heavily, but for anything that, once we are posting it, once we are hosting it, we're making the disclosure. And so even though as a parent, you can go share your students' confidential information with whoever, we can't post it on our website. So, that's just what we would have to figure out is I think you would still need to have a separate way to communicate with board members that was not presumptively open.
That makes complete sense to me, to channels, one private, one public. If a parent, I mean, I've noticed just the emails that we get, I would say 80 of them are not private, don't have any privacy stuff in it. So it's just not, and when you talk about translating them all, that becomes a whole nother lift unless we're using an electronic translator, an automatic translator. But anyway, but I certainly would expect it to be two channels if we do.
Okay, Will, do you have thoughts about using this as a method for public comment around a board meeting versus using this as a potential method for like ongoing public comment?
Just some of my thoughts on it is that, we're asking our community to engage us in any possible way they can, because they can't physically make the meeting and they can't be there, but they want to make sure people hear them. And I actually do still get letters. People physically write a letter and send it to central office and I get a letter, right? So I don't have an issue allowing it as long as the person is asking for it. But I think we would need some policy around it for timing, right? I think it needs to be fair to people that come and speak publicly. So if we have a 3-minute limit, I think we would have to engage with that 3-minute limit if it's going to be read aloud, right? But I think if we're going to truly, ask for people to speak, if they send us a letter via, physical mail or email, I mean, I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure we make it to where it's the same rules, right? I wouldn't want somebody to write 10 minutes letter and then the person that was able to speak can only speak for 3, right? So I would just want it to be fair in that manner.
May I make a suggestion? Because I mean, your public comment period is already pretty long in your meetings, and I know that we're having an ongoing struggle of getting things done in the meetings. I wonder if there's a compromise of continuing the public comment practice that you have, but also allowing written like having an email address where people can submit written public comments that would be distributed to board members and posted online after a quick review to make sure they're not vulgar or, profane and so forth. But not read aloud during the meeting because you just don't have time in your meetings to add more.
I like
that. That is, I got a later note from my friend in Durham here that's what happens since they receive them 3 to 5 hours ahead of time. They do get emailed to board members, exactly what you're saying, Eva. They get screened and emailed to board members in advance of the meeting.
Mm-hmm. And I think in Durham, they are not also having live public comment. They are doing this instead of live public comment.
So, yeah, I think there could be a place where we have this OCS public comment email address, and then we post public comments within 24 hours before and after the meeting, or something like that, and so people have this opportunity to post, but they're not read aloud at meetings. So I think that then we wouldn't have to necessarily limit 500 words or whatever it would be. I can tell you about a page of writing is 3 minutes. I know that because of my extensive public comment background. And I would be surprised if people wrote a whole lot more than that but if they felt that passionately and we weren't reading them out loud, I mean, if you want to write 10 pages and we post it, that would be fine by me. I'm happy to read it. I do have concern about having a whole email address that goes public. I think that we would be talking about spending a lot of money on someone moderating that. And, I haven't heard that as a big request. I mean, I haven't heard anyone request that. So, I worry about how much it would cost to have a whole email address that was constantly streaming publicly. But I think having a public comment email address that gets posted around board meetings would be sort of a healthy compromise, but it'll just be my 2 cents.
I have trouble trying to first of all, it would seem to me that if we just limited it around the meetings, it would have to be from the time that it is published till the meeting. Because every time we say, oh, you've got to do it within a couple of hours before the meeting, we're setting rules, we're setting the restrictions on public comment. So I think people should be able to comment when it's convenient for them, not when it's convenient for us. I think that I'm going to assume people can read, and if it's a public listserv that they can read it, that there's no reason for us to read it. But I have trouble from meeting to meeting. We're in a long-term pandemic. We're in some very issues that are long-term, and the issues the public has that aren't getting to our agenda at all. And so how does that public comment get to us? So I don't know how to draw the line as to when does a public comment get on our listserv versus it doesn't. But I like the idea of saying this is the public comment listserv, so going in right away, you know that if you're making a comment here, it's public. You know, and at some point people are continually abuse that and use it for profanity or use for disclosing private information, then we'll have to block them.
So I kind of like a compromise idea just from like, you know, giving it a try. And I think like for example, Durham Public Schools, which is just one model, and I'm sure there are other ones that are different, but I think they receive them like within the week before the board meeting, and then they just have an end because they need to be able to review and distribute to board members. So, I mean, maybe it is that when we post that there's going to be a board meeting, or, you know, the agenda gets posted or whatever happens there, that there's a place to submit your comments, which will be shared with board members, you know, in advance of the meeting, and that they need to be received, you know, let's say by noon or something, so that a staff member has a chance to review them. That's just in line with that compromise thought. Will, how about you?
I'm okay with the first step approach. I just want to make sure that the public has access to those. And I want to make sure we include if somebody wants to physically mail it in. Because, you know, there are people that don't have internet access. They don't have a way to do that. And like I said, I still do get letters and I appreciate every one of them.
So what do we do with this at this point? Do we make a decision now? Do we bring it to the board to make a decision?
I would recommend, you know, Hillary's sitting here, but I recommend we bring it to the full board and just make sure, because we don't have all the board members here. And I think it's quite a change, and make sure everybody, you know, has a chance to speak to it or make recommendations on it. That's just my feeling.
I mean, I'm good with that. Eva, would you be willing to sort of write up what you've heard here and how it would work? And then we can just put it on the agenda for the next meeting to get the full board's thoughts around.
Sure. So what I've heard is to have a public comment email address where people can, or some other electronic outlet where people can send public comments with the understanding that they will be made public at the time of the board meeting and also distributed to all board members. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. And we have 15 minutes left. So one other suggestion that Bonnie had sent in, and we talked about briefly last time, was the idea of restructuring board meetings to be more similar to the county commissioner meetings. The feedback that I've kind of heard a little bit is that it doesn't seem that doable because we only have 2 meetings a month. It doesn't seem feasible to have action items that infrequently. So I just open up for further discussion on this idea, and Bonnie, feel free to elaborate if you'd like.
So I think that with that feedback, it means there's some confusion. First of all, the way the county commissioners do it is they have business meetings every 2 weeks, period. And they're always business meetings, and they have public comment at the beginning of the meeting. That's for items not on the agenda. I think they limit that to 60 minutes, I don't remember. And then if you have comments and it's on the agenda, then you bring it, you speak when the agenda item comes up, and that makes it easier for people so they can time their participation in the meeting when the agenda item comes up. So again, it's business meeting only every 2 weeks with public comment. Now, if they want to have a work session, the work sessions are scheduled at a different time. So I think the commissioners meet on Tuesdays, so their work sessions are typically on Thursdays. And at those meetings, there is no public comment, but by policy, they make no decisions. They take no actions in those meetings. And if actions come out of the work sessions, it gets kicked to the next business meeting so that the public can comment. So I think it's a more intuitive process, and it makes sure that it gives the board time to take action during its business meetings, and it gives us some more focused time for deliberation and discussion on topics that are not really ready for broader public conversation. So that's kind of the proposal. And the work sessions are kind of, I think of them as mini retreats.
So I don't think it's realistic that we're going to add more meetings to our regular schedule. And so that, I guess that's where my concern is. Like, I hear you and I'm not opposed to that philosophically, but we're not going to have 2 business meetings a month and work sessions.
Okay, I guess I don't know how to respond. The commission, they have a collaboration session with the school board. Those are usually on Thursdays, aren't they? Not even on their Tuesday night meetings, if I remember correctly. So they have some, but I don't know I don't think they have work sessions every week, but they might have one a month. They have a couple during budget period. So I don't know how to respond to that. I think you have to do the work has to get done, right? Whatever it is. So it just gives it a little bit more structure that makes it easier for the public to engage.
I think Bonnie, one of the problems is that we have frequent action items, and it just doesn't seem feasible to have all of our action items only on 1 meeting per month, which is what would happen here if we made half meeting work sessions.
Hold on. I am not saying 1 meeting per month. I'm saying 2 meetings, business meetings every other week, as we do now. So there's always, because once you go to work sessions every other month, then you're limiting public participation. I think that's wrong. So again, how does it is they have business meetings every other week with action items, with public comment, with all of that. And if they want to have a work session, those are scheduled in addition, and usually on a different day of the week.
So do you want to rename our work sessions board meetings? Is that where you're coming from? Because I mean, we do have retreats and specially called meetings that have different rules.
I don't understand the difference between our maybe.
Well, it's in policy.
And there is
now.
Sorry, I was just going to say there's not any. The only legal difference. I mean, a work session is whatever you say it is, and your policy says you're going to have them on the 4th Monday, but you will consider action items at your work session. For purposes of open meetings law, you have at least 1 regular meeting a month, and it is at that regular meeting that you hold public comment. Now, you also allow public comment on limited purposes at your work sessions. You don't have to, but you go beyond what's required by having public comment at the work sessions too. You limit it by topic. You cannot limit a public comment by topic at a regular board meeting generally. I mean, with some, within some boundaries, reasonable boundaries. So I think that's where that practice came from, and also in an effort to just have work sessions where you can get more done because you are focusing on the presentations.
Yeah,
So
Mhm.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
I was just gonna, a little history is I remember, the board kind of meeting. You used to have business meetings every 2 weeks. And when the Confederate flag advocacy came up, that there was so much public comment that the board made, not supporting it, but the board made a decision to change the meeting structure at that time. And I'm just not sure that the change is that effective, because I get constant comments about, it's just confusing for the public to say, when can I speak? Can I speak? Can I not speak?
So they did change it, and they took public comment at work sessions completely away. So then when we got, no, just please let me talk, don't interrupt me, please. When we got elected, we reinstated some public comment at work sessions. So we actually, this board brought comment back to work sessions.
Right, and I guess what I'm saying is, let's go back to the full meeting structure. So rather than have a work session that limits public comment, to have business meetings twice a month that allow public comment. And what we did in the past is the public comment was always at the beginning of the meeting, which I thought was a little nonsensical, that if it's an agenda item and the board's going to get a presentation, then it would be helpful if the public got that presentation before they spoke. So, I just think that structure is a little bit more intuitive to people. So I'm not, again, without just trying to say, what is the simple way for people to engage? And because the structure is very difficult. It's like, is it a business meeting? Is it a work session? Is it public comment here or there? It's like, let's just do it.
So what if we, in the meantime, if there's consensus from the board, we can do whatever. But my suggestion for clarity for the public is that we write a blurb about what form of public comment is happening where we sign up. So if it's a board meeting, we say, you'll be speaking at the beginning and you can talk about anything. And if it's a work session, we're very explicit. This is a work session, so we are limited to 1 hour of public comment on agenda items, and you'll have to tell us what you want to speak about, so that at least there's clarity when you're signing up.
Yeah, I think we're at the end of our time, and I think I'm not hearing a lot of consensus that we want to completely change the structure of the meetings, but I think the communication part, like Hillary's talking about, is important. And so, and we are increasing public comment, which is good. That's what we're trying to do, be better listeners and be more transparent. So it does seem more like, if the blurb, are you imagining the blurb would be like on the district website where I'm imagining it would be where the meeting is listed, and there could be, note, this is a work session and here are your options for public comment, or note, this is a business, whatever.
I think we could link to our policy around it, so people can read the whole thing if they want to, and when it's a board meeting, explain what that means and highlight that, and then when it's a work session, highlight that. I can work with Melanie and Mr. Jones to make sure that improves, and we can kind of see how it goes, and we can tweak it. I'm not trying to control how we do this, but just if it's helpful, I can work with him on that.
So I would prefer for any of our meetings listed, I'm okay with linking it to the policy, but explicitly saying public comments, click here, right? To speak at the meeting, click here, because that was one of the things that I hear a lot is, hey, I see this registration thing, but where do I actually just sign up to comment? So I would like to be very prescriptive and leading our community to here's how you do it. But I agree with Hillary to help them understand the differences of it. And I think that helps at least remove some of the confusion about, because I always get the call of, can I not comment? And I'm like, of course, you could always comment. It's just the timing and the subject, right? So I would like to at least make sure we lead people to how they can participate a little more prescriptively.
Got it.
I agree.
Everyone, this is, we're at the,
If I could just say, because I'm fine, because there was a big problem recently with our agendas, but I feel very strongly that our meeting structure is over-engineered, and if you have to read policy in order to know how you can participate in a board meeting, then that's a problem. So I'd like us to maybe, we can go back and maybe not talk about this at the end of the meeting, but talk about a different, talk about simplifying the meeting structure. And I just want to throw that out there because I mean, what we're talking about isn't really a change. But if you guys don't want to change it, you don't want to change it. But I think it's way over-engineered and confusing to the public.
go ahead, Will.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is if I had to net out what I've been hearing on the discussion is that, and I agree, we need to have at least 2 meetings a month that we can take action on. But what I think I've been hearing you say, Bonnie, and I do not want to put words in your mouth, and I think it's to Hillary's point, was Bonnie's talking about a meeting type that is business, that we don't transact any actions. So there would be a 3rd meeting a month that there's no public comment. It's just working through things and giving direction versus action. And the other meetings would be in similar formats where people could comment on anything they wanted to, and they would just be able to do it. And so people would know, these I can comment on, this one I can't because they're not going to take any action, but they're doing work. That's what I think I heard you say, Bonnie, but I do not want to put words in your mouth.
Well, let me make it really simple. To me, there's no difference technically between a business meeting and a work session. I think they're the same. The only difference is where we move public comment on it. There's action items, there's information items in both of them. So let's make them the same. And if we want to have a work session, we don't have to have any if we don't want to, but a work session is a meeting where there's no public comment. But I think that we should have a standard way for the public to engage in a board business meeting. And I think we should get rid of, that's all. I think this.
Well, the only thing I want to say, and I know we're running out of time, Carrie, I apologize, but I just want to say this out loud is, if the board is taking action, I want the public to be able to comment. That's, I don't have a strong preference on this. I think there's a lot of confusion about, Bonnie, how you're saying this, but to me, if the board is taking action, I want the ability for the community to take action. And I think the board should have some ability to make sure we can do work during a meeting, that it's not all just public comment. That's the only 2 cents I wanted to put in on.
I agree fully. And I don't think our structure is, I think our structure now is confusing, which is why our meetings run so long, which is why we're having, but.
Okay, Bonnie, okay, I think we've heard, I think we've heard your point, and it's, and it's a fair point, and so I think we're gonna have to come back to some of this, but in the meantime, it sounds like Hillary's gonna work with Melanie and Todd to at least clean up the, and I have to say, I really do appreciate how much our website, and a ton of overhauling our website, and it is so much better than it was. So, it's fine and fair that we need to keep tweaking because a lot of work's been done to make it more accessible, but so that there's going to be a little bit of clarity on what the public comment options are, as well as the fact that, Eva, we appreciate you bringing back some of the language we captured today and how we could even expand some public comment options for written public comment. So with all that, I think we have to stop there. And I just want to say I will follow up, but it's my understanding, I have been in communication with Dr. Dawson, and I believe that she and Ms. Braxton will do an update on CTE that we started last month with Will, and they're going to do
an update for us in a presentation. And we also are working with Ms. Kara Stewart, who is a teacher out at Gravelly Hill, and she does presentations on North Carolina tribes. And she's been working with Dr. Keeling to come and start off a cultural competency conversation with us. And it would also be like a time of planning for when we can do a bigger event with her, because she would be doing this with our committee on a Friday morning. She's about a half-hour window to come join us. There's also been a request for updates from board committee reps. So I think we'll do some of that in April as well. So thanks for everyone's time and participation today. I think we got to talk about a lot of important concepts and priorities. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Okay, seconded. Thanks, everybody. Meeting's adjourned.